Welcome to Algebra Academy YouTube channel. In this video, we'll be talking about one of the most important biological processes, which is photosynthesis. Photosynthesis. We can break this word into two other words, which is photo, which is from a Greek light. It means a Greek word rather. It means light, while synthesis means to build. To build. Now, if we put these two words together to form photosynthesis, it simply means we are using light to build something. And the definition of photosynthesis is the process whereby plants, green plants, produce or manufacture their food in the presence of water, sunlight, and carbon dioxide. And indirectly, this process produces food for all living things. So therefore, this process is essential and it needs to be understood. We can represent photosynthesis by a general reaction. It requires carbon dioxide, which is CO2, plus it requires water, and it requires light as well. So putting this in a reaction now, the product will be a glucose plus oxygen as byproduct. So we can balance this reaction by saying we have 6 carbon here. We can balance carbon here to be 6. We have oxygen. We have 12 hydrogen here. So we balance hydrogen as well. So the reaction is balanced. As we have 6 carbon, we have 6 carbon. We have 12 hydrogen. We also have 12 hydrogen at the product side. We have from glucose 6 oxygen. And we have 12 oxygen here in the oxygen molecule produced as byproduct. Then at the reactant side, here we have 12 oxygen. We have 2 here multiplied by the coefficient, which is 12. And we have 6 from water. So we have 18 oxygen, 6 carbon, 6 carbon, 12 hydrogen, 12 hydrogen. The reaction is balanced. This is the net equation to represent photosynthesis. And from here, what we said in our definition has been explained with this reaction because it occurs in the presence of carbon dioxide, water, and light to produce an organic product, which is glucose and oxygen as byproduct. So we want to look at the mechanism of this reaction. What is actually going on in this reaction? Now, we can say photosynthesis, for better understanding, it takes place in 2 stages. Number 1, we call it light reaction. The light reaction. But it is more appropriate to call it the light dependent stage. The light dependent stage, because everything in the light reaction depends on the availability of light. Without light, that particular stage cannot take place. And we have the other stage, which we call the dark reaction. The dark reaction. And here, it does not necessarily need light to take place. So dark reaction is not an appropriate sentence, or let me say appropriate word to explain what goes on there, because majority of students used to think it only takes place in the dark. No. So we can, in other words, says it is light independent stage. Light independent. It means it does not necessarily need light to take place. Either there's light or not, that particular stage will actually occur. Then, in this video, we'll only be able to explain what goes on in the light reaction. Maybe in other videos we can explain the dark reaction, but for today, we'll be explaining what goes on in the light reaction. Now, we need some inorganic substances. Some inorganic substances are needed for photosynthesis to take place. Number one is CO2, which we have mentioned in the reaction. Number two, we have your water, H2O. And the last but not the least, we have the light. How are these substances utilized? That is what we will be looking at in this reaction. So we'll be looking at the mechanism of reactions, the mechanism of redox reaction that takes place in photosynthesis. You know, we have the light reaction we can represent with this box. If this box is the light reaction where it takes place, and before I forget it, all of light reaction takes place in the thylakoid. It takes place in the thylakoid of the chloroplast. The chloroplast membrane has two membranes that surrounds a fluid called stroma, within which a sac called thylakoid are suspended. So this thylakoid membrane, it helps the chloroplast, the site of photochemical electron transport reaction. It helps to trap light, and it helps in the transduction of light energy to chemical energy. So the whole of light reaction takes place in the thylakoid membrane. So let's say thylakoid membrane. Thylakoid membrane, that's where the light reaction takes place. So let's represent our light reaction by LR, light reaction, the light reaction stage. How does it take place? It takes place in the presence of light. In the presence of light, or call it photon. Photon like this. Then we also need water, H2O, coming into the light reaction. And we have oxygen as our byproduct. It also takes place in the light reaction. Then we have the production of ATP from the light reaction. And we also have the production of NADPH, a coenzyme, also in the light reaction. So we're going to explain in this video how all these things occur in the thylakoid, how the photon, how it helps in that light reaction, how your water molecule comes in, how your oxygen molecule is liberated, how NADPH is produced, and how ATP is also produced. Now we can say everything that goes on here, we can summarize and say we have number one that occur. The first thing that will occur in the light reaction is absorption of light. Absorption of light. And number two, which is the second thing that occur, is transfer of electron. Transfer of electron. And the third thing that occur is production of ATP. Production of ATP. While the last thing is production of NADPH2. So we're going to take all these things one after the other and look at how it takes place in the thylakoid membrane of the chloroplast. Now, I've already said the light reaction, four things goes on there. Number one, absorption of light. And number two, transfer of electron. Transfer of electron. Let's represent electron by that. And number three, we have production. Production of ATP, and number 4, production of NADPH2. Now I want to look at the mechanism of how all these things takes place. Now before I go to that mechanism, I'd like to tell you that the chlorophyll molecules are embedded in photosystems. They are embedded in something we call photosystems. And you can short it and say we have photosystem, PS. Because we have two types. We have photosystem 1 and photosystem 2. And that is where the chlorophyll molecules are embedded. So now we all know when light falls on the leaf, in the leaf you have the chloroplast, in the chlorophyll. So when light falls on it, the molecules of the chlorophyll, they will be excited. That is, they absorb light energy and they become excited. The excitation by one molecule can get passed around from one molecule to another molecule. So eventually, a photon may strike the reaction center complex. We have the reaction center complex. Let's call it reaction center complex. The reaction center complex. Immediately the light strikes the reaction center complex, the high energy excited electron will be transferred to another molecule called the primary electron acceptor. Primary electron acceptor. Primary electron acceptor. So when this is done, it will pass down to several other electron acceptor, and eventually either ATP or NADP is produced. So that is just a summary of what goes on there. So to elaborate now, to elaborate what I've explained earlier, I've told you we are only explaining the light reaction, and we can say the next thing we are explaining, so as to know the mechanism of what is going on here, is photophosphorylation. Everything I explained here, photosystem, absorption of light, passing down to the reaction center, then transferring to the primary acceptor, transferring to other electron acceptor, down to wherever it is going, is called photophosphorylation. Photophosphorylation means the production of ATP with the help of light. So this photophosphorylation can either be cyclic or non-cyclic. Can either be cyclic or non-cyclic. So we have to take it one after the other. The cyclic. For the cyclic photophosphorylation now. The cyclic photophosphorylation, I told you, it all starts from when the photon strikes the electron, sorry, the reaction center. Let's say this is the reaction center. This is the reaction center. Immediately light strikes this reaction center, electrons will be energized and they will be passed. As I said, they will be passed to the photosystem 1 this time around. We call it PS1. Electrons are energized. Once the light strikes the reaction center, the electrons are energized and they are excited. So they will be passed to, they leave their ground state and they are passed to the PS1, the photosystem 1. Then from this photosystem 1, they are passed down to the primary electron acceptor. Let's call it PEA, the primary electron acceptor. And from that, they are passed to electron. They are passing it down like that. They are passed to another electron acceptor called the ferrodoxine. Then from the ferrodoxine, they are passed down to the cytochrome. And in the cytochrome, before it even gets to the cytochrome, that's where we have, in the process of going from ferrodoxine to cytochrome, that is when we have the conversion of ADP to ATP. ADP to ATP. ADP means adenosine diphosphate, while ATP means adenosine triphosphate. Now, you can see the number of phosphates here has increased. Here we have di, 2-phosphate, and here we have tri, 3-phosphate. So we have justified the meaning of this word, photophosphorylation. We have been able to phosphorylate the diphosphate present in the thylakoid. We have been able to phosphorylate or add one more phosphate group to turn it to triphosphate. Then that is done during the process of the transfer of electron in the cyclic photophosphorylation. Then the electron is as well passed down from the cytochrome complex. It will be passed down to the plastocyanine. From the plastocyanine, then it returns back to the reaction center. The whole process is now cyclic. Like the electron returns back to where it is coming from. Let me just repeat myself once again. From the reaction center, it is passed down to the PS1. Then from PS1, which is photosystem 1, it is passed to the primary electron acceptor. From that, it is passed to the ferrodoxine. It's also an electron acceptor, but this is the primary electron acceptor. So from ferrodoxine to cytochrome complex, we have the conversion of ADP to ATP. We have absorbed light. The first thing has been achieved. We are transferring the electron already, achieved. Production of ATP is also achieved. Don't forget that this process is cyclic because electron returns back to the reaction center. And here we can say that we have been able to generate ATP. Number one. Then you can see that the whole process involves only PS1. Because I told you we have photosystem 1 and photosystem 2. This whole cyclic process involves only the PS1. And one quantum of energy is also absorbed. This is the whole thing that happens in the first photophosphorylation, which is the cyclic photophosphorylation. Then let's move to the non-cyclic photophosphorylation now, so as to know what is going on there. So in the non-cyclic now, let us look at what goes on there. Here, we also have a reaction center, but we have another photosystem here, which is PS2. PS2, which means photosystem 2. And from the reaction center, if light is absorbed from the reaction center, passed down to two electrons pass down to the photosystem 2. Then the first thing that will occur in photosystem 2 is photolysis. Photolysis of water. You know, I said we have three things that must be available for photosynthesis to take place. We have water, we have light, and we have carbon dioxide. We have not used water since the start of our explanation. Since the explanation of the mechanism, we have not mentioned water, we have not mentioned carbon dioxide, but we have mentioned light. So this is the first time we will know what goes on with water, or what are used for. So in the non-cyclic photophosphorylation, that is where we have photolysis of water. Photo means light, lysis means to break. So we want to use the energy from light to break our water. So it will be from H2O splitted into H plus and OH minus. H plus and OH minus. You can see we have it this way. Your OH minus recombines. To form 2H2O plus O2. This is the oxygen given out as byproduct. It's given out as byproduct. So if you are asked, where the oxygen given out as byproduct from photosynthesis is coming from, is actually coming from water. Now, that's the first thing that will occur in PS2, which is in the non-cyclic photophosphorylation. Before 2 electrons will also be passed to primary electron acceptor as usual. Then from there, it will pass down to plastoquinones. Plastoquinones, and from plastoquinones, it will be passed down to cytochrome complex. 2 electrons. Then from cytochrome complex, it will pass down to plastocyanine. Then, during the process of passing down from cytochrome complex to plastocyanine, we have the conversion of ADP to ATP as well. Conversion of ADP to ATP. Then from plastocyanine, it will be passed to PS1. It's supposed to go non-cyclic back to PS2, but no, it's supposed to go cyclic to PS2, but this time it is non-cyclic. So it will pass down to PS1 again. From PS1, 2 electrons will also be passed to primary electron acceptor again. Then from the primary electron acceptor, it will be passed to ferrodoxine. Let me just represent with FR because that place cannot contain it. Ferrodoxine. So from ferrodoxine, it will be finally passed to your NADP. NADP is a coenzyme. Now, if you don't forget the definition of oxidation and reduction, you can summarize as oil rig. Oxidation is loss of electron. Oxidation is loss. Reduction is gain. Now, this NADP is gaining electron now because the electron is doing transfer from ferrodoxine to NADP. So it is gain of electron. So what goes on with NADP here is reduction. Reduction goes on with NADP. And, reduction is also addition of hydrogen. Addition of hydrogen is also reduction. So we have 2 hydrogen added. The hydrogen from the water here, the hydrogen from the photolysis of water, the OH has recombined to form H2O and O2 as byproduct. So the hydrogen left here is what we are adding to the NADP to form NADPH2, which is our reduced coenzyme, or you call it reduced coenzyme 2. Reduced coenzyme 2. Now, the whole process of photosynthesis has left us with, the whole process of light reaction left us with 2 things. Number 1, the production of ATP. Number 2, the production of NADPH2. And number 3, our CO2 that we've not used. So these 3 things will go to the dark reaction. These 3 things are going to the dark reaction. So in the next video, we'll move to the explanation of dark reaction. Kindly subscribe and like the video and let me know what you feel like about the video in the comment section. Thank you.